All right, everybody, welcome to the Alchemy Podcast, process of human transformation and fulfillment. I'm really excited for our guest today, Joe Huff. Welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to catch up with you again. One thing I really admire about you, Joe, is every time I have a conversation with you, I know you came and spoke at my event in January. We went to lunch shortly after. When I'm with you, I feel your presence. Like you're fully engaged. You're fully present. Feels like you're really soaking in the moment. And I think that's a really rare trait today, especially in like this fast paced moving world. And I know your book, when we'll get into that, talks about that, but have you always been like that? Like where does that come from? Is that something that's kind of natural to you? Is that like a skill you picked up?
Can you repeat that? I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Like,
no,
got me.
First,
Got me.
like that. Yeah. Wow. That's like a really amazing compliment. In this current world that we live in, I mean, it's a battle, it's so hard to be present. A lot of the things that, that we've gone through, my wife and I, and then me personally over the years, have really put life in perspective for me. So I just think that I've probably put more practice into constantly stopping and reminding myself, this is my life. And it really makes a difference whether I'm present or not, because it's just so easy to get caught up in everything else and thinking that the wrong things are important and getting ahead of yourself. And, that's a really great compliment. I hope I can live up to it.
Yeah. No, you got me off guard. Got the jokes too.
Yeah.
So, one thing I love a lot. I'm not. It's okay if you're not familiar with it, but I love Michael Singer's work. I don't know if Michael Singer. He wrote Untethered Soul, Surrender Experiment.
I haven't read them, but I know who he is.
And his kind of main message is the reason you're unhappy. I mean, he's got a lot, but it kind of breaks down to the reason you're unhappy is because life isn't unfolding the way you think that it should. Or it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times in life, we rush around to get life to be a certain way. I need my career to look a certain way. I need my relationship to look a certain way. I need, my family to look a certain way, my health. Right. And it's not. So I'm going to go out and fix everything. And then eventually you kind of realize that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And knowing based upon some of our previous conversations, you've kind of gone through something similar. And I know you've had like some, a near death experience close to you and whatnot. And so how has the realizing that you can't control life, right?
Yeah. If you really go back even much further, some of the smartest or at least most influential figures throughout our entire history as, a quote unquote intelligent species, all have that same message of, give me the strength to, basically knowing how to separate the things that we can control and the things that we can't. The Buddhist, whole message was, basically if something can be changed, why worry? If something cannot be changed, why worry? So really just accepting that our whole idea of suffering and frustration is usually brought on by ourselves by having an expectation that then we don't live up to, but we create that. So I think, that's why so many people, I think when they put some type of gratitude practice into their life, it changes a lot for people, because once you start to actually think of the things that you have to be grateful for, and you start to actually stop comparing yourself really to most things. But if you're going to actually compare yourself in any way, just thinking about how much better you are than a lot of folks, it makes life seem pretty damn good, so no matter where you are. And that's why like the happiness levels that we find, we did a study of over 20,000 people, and there's lots of other studies out that show that, it's once you get past that basic maintenance level of life, if you can afford to survive, the happiness quotient, it's not about being super rich. It's about basically having a good perspective on life.
Yeah, talk more about that study. I mean, 20,000 person study. That's like no small task, right?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, well, it's part of, the book. Well, first of all, the
yeah.
book itself is Experiential
Yeah.
Billionaire, Build a Life Rich in Experience and Die with No Regret. And I'll just start off by saying, it's not about, bucket list slash, influencer style traveling, adventure, etc. That's what I like. And there's a lot of that in the book and a lot of in our personal stories, but it's really about finding, discovering and rediscovering the things that matter most to you and taking action on them before it's
Mm.
too late, because that's the number one regret people have. And, there's a really famous study from Cornell that talks about that. We found the same data in our study, but we asked people in the study what the things they valued most in life were. And it was experiences. Nobody said like their watch or their car, or their
Yeah.
boat or whatnot. And it was just really eye opening because, from there we asked like, what kind of experiences, or what are the things specifically, what are the things you regret? What are your biggest regrets? And it was the things they didn't do. So the most valuable things were experiences they had. The biggest regrets were experiences they didn't have. And that just kind of sums up like the problem with most people's lives is they're not using their time as effectively as they could or should, because they don't look at it as their most valuable asset. So I think once you stop and really think about that, again, another thing about the study that I'll just share is when we tell people this stuff, we do keynotes and workshops on this topic. We don't have to convince anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this. As soon as we start to tell them, they're like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But they don't act it. We get caught up in this like crazy, we have this like glitch in our matrix where we
Yeah.
think
Why do
that,
you think that is? How do you make that leap, right? We all know we value experiences. Like for
yeah,
me, I love traveling. I love going to sporting events in different cities. Like I'm a diehard University of Utah football
mm,
fan. My favorite thing is to go to like an away game
yeah,
and experience the other crowd and the university campus and the stadium. And I love that, right? I know that I love that. Um, and everyone else kind of has their thing, right?
yeah.
Everyone has their experience. So how do you like, what does it take to like make that leap? Because we all know it.
Yeah, so the obstacles, and these are the things like that we address in the book and in our talks and workshops, is what are the things that stop people from living their most inspired and fulfilled lives, and avoiding those end of life regrets. And it's always the same. We ask those questions in the survey. The number one reason people don't do the things that they most want to do is they're afraid,
Mm.
which again, we can all obviously identify with that. They're afraid of what would happen if they try it and it goes wrong. They never take the time to do it, so they don't have the time, quote unquote, or they don't have the money, or they never got around to it. And a lot of people don't even get around to thinking about what it is they want to do, which is even a bigger, first step problem. If you haven't taken the time to really think about what you want, in your one precious life, you can't even take those steps. But the way to get over it is really simple. It's actually action. Action is inaction is basically the biggest problem. Action is the anti-regret. If you start
Mm.
taking steps, you can actually change your entire life. And it doesn't have to be big, bold, life-changing steps right out the gate. You can start with daily small steps, and those types of things give you the confidence and momentum to keep going. So most
It's like you're
people,
flexing that muscle, right?
yeah, and I think a lot of people, what they do, again, when you see a book like ours, or hear people speak about, bucket list kind of adventures or things that are like these once in a lifetime experiences, they think, well, either A, they think I could never do that, or B, they think I'd love to do that someday. And then
Mm.
they fall into that, what we call someday syndrome, and they never take any actual steps toward it. They don't even bother to figure out what those steps are. But it's because it's a big giant thing and it's a bit nebulous. But if you stop and go, okay, what are some things I can do now? Maybe they're related to that thing, maybe not, but if they are, somewhat related, like we like to talk about like travel ones because it's easy. But like for instance, say your dream was to like go on a road trip in Italy. Okay, well, maybe that's going to take you a long time to save up and plan, but you could start learning some Italian on Duolingo. You can start learning about the regions in Italy, watch some shows about it, figure out how to pronounce some of your favorite foods, and slowly build up some experiences. Cook some homemade pasta and pizza and things like that. Those are experiences in themselves that are very cheap, very easy, but they're unique and different. And that's those kinds of moments are what those unique moments in life are what expand our time and really enhance the value that we have. It's when we start getting to that repetitiveness of like, I'm not going to do anything different because I'm waiting to do the one big thing. I'm going to miss and ignore all of those little gems throughout the day. And, that's where you get into like the really big
Yeah,
danger
I
zone.
mean, I would assume too. I remember reading a study, and who knows, reading a study, what does that mean on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
It means
Yeah.
nothing. But I remember reading in some capacity that just planning a trip,
You get the
you get like a dopamine rush or the
endorphins and
endorphin ring,
dopamine. Yeah, for
and
sure.
so you can build on that
Yeah.
energy and those good brain chemicals, right?
Yeah, the expectation of the thing. Think about even like you just talked about you love going to an away game, right?
Yeah, I love
I
it.
guarantee as you start planning the one you're going to, you're like, oh, this is gonna be great. We're gonna stay here and we're gonna do this, and this is the friends that are going. Like you get so much joy out of those steps. And it's again, it's ironic that people don't start, because once people start, it's very rarely do people go, oh, I regret doing that thing that I said I always wanted to do. Like almost always at the end, they're like, maybe it was difficult or expensive or whatever. At the end, they're almost always like, yeah, but it was worth it. That was like a once in a lifetime thing. That's why those people that, you know, annoyingly, even a lot of the times people will keep talking about a trip they took 10 years
Yeah,
ago. They'll be like, oh yeah, when I went to Italy and I
you're
did
right.
this thing. And it's because it's seared in their brain as this special time. But we
Yeah,
just need to create more of those.
it's funny too because I was, University of Utah football schedule came out, and I noticed they were playing
Mm,
at Houston Cougars, and then coincidentally, no shame here, everybody, diehard Taylor Swift fan, big Swiftie.
amazing.
Wasn't a Swiftie. Then I went to SoFi last year when Taylor was here. Kind of got dragged to it. And
Yeah,
like, sure, Taylor Swift, went to
sure
her
you did.
concert,
Sure
and
you
I'm
did.
like, everything switched. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm all in. I'm a Swiftie now. Wear it on my sleeves. And then I saw that same weekend that University of Utah plays at Houston, the next day Taylor's playing her Eras tour,
Yeah.
and I'm like, double dip,
Yeah.
and so like another just a jolt of endorphin. So yeah, kind of the experiences. When I look back at my life, like the highlights are, when I took the leap and went in and jumped into that experience. I'm curious, with this study, did anything else, what stood out to you on the study other than travel? Right, because travel's kind of like experiences. You think you want to go travel. Like
Those,
what else showed up?
those actually weren't even the top ones, though, to be honest. Like that was another thing that was really, um, it was enlightening, and it was also something that just made it so much more actionable for most people, is to realize that most people don't need to or want to go climb Mount Everest or do something crazy. They want to do something that's really possible, and they're just not taking the steps. And those things were things like learn a foreign language, learn a musical instrument, learn how to cook a different type of cuisine, travel actually to somewhere very close. So I won't include that in like the big travel, but like a lot of people said, I always wanted to go to the, state I grew up in. That's two
Mhm.
states over. It's like, you can do that. Tons of people said, I want to go skydiving. Skydiving costs like $200, So even if, again, maybe you're not, rolling in the dough, you can still plan that. And it might take you and me, a week to figure that out. It might take someone else 6 months, but you can plan it if you just put it on your calendar. So those are the kinds of things that were like those daily nuggets. And the other things that were really, really glaring were so much of it was relationship based. So
Mm.
much of it was, I really wish I kept in better contact with my old friends or my family, or I wish I had talked to this person or told someone how I felt, or, things that are, again, they're free and they're actually things that you can take action on like today.
Yeah, they're accessible right now.
You could remove that regret like in 10 minutes. You could
Yeah,
literally call and leave a message or whatever the case. And lots of those things were like that. And that to me, I think is really a big part about what we're trying to tell people is like,
yeah,
there's a ton of easy, free, or very cheap things that you can do to improve your life dramatically.
yeah. So this is your sign from the universe. After this podcast's over, I want you to text an old childhood friend and check in.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
actually ask people to, in some of our workshops, one of the things you do is say, get out your phone and think of someone that means a lot to you that you haven't spoken to in a long time, that you have never really told that. and send them a message, a video message, and say, hey, I just want you to know that you did or said or whatever the thing was that made a difference in my life, and it meant a lot to me. Because not only will that feel good for the person sending the message, the person receiving the message is going to be like, that's amazing.
Light them up.
Yeah. Like, how awesome is that? Like, if you got that today from somebody, it was like, hey, Doug, like, I just want you to know you changed my life in this one way, whether it was huge or little or whatever. Like, that's powerful. It gives people meaning and purpose. And that makes us, I think, all feel a bit better.
Yeah, I love this concept, Joe, because I look back at my life and I went through a major, transition in 2017, kind of leaving companies and kind of left the religion I was raised in and was going through some kind of, big life shifts. And I remember taking a moment of realizing, hey, I'm kind of killing an older version of myself and introducing a new version. And I kind of felt like I had a clean sheet of paper. And I remember actually being like, what am I curious about as far as hobbies are concerned? Right? What experiences do I want to try that I've always kind of been curious about? And the first one that came to mind was skiing. So I grew up in Utah and I never skied because I played basketball. So I was on like the AAU teams and our coaches were like, don't ski. We don't want to blow your knee out in the middle of the season. And so
it's reasonable.
And my parents didn't ski. So I didn't know how to ski, but I live, but close to some of the best skiing in the world. So I remember had to muster up the courage. And I remember taking a skiing lesson when I was 27. And it was me and two other like fifth graders. And we're on the bunny hill and we're doing the hot dog pizza thing, right? Yeah. And I look back at that moment and there was a lot of fear. Like, what if I screw up? I'm going to look silly in front of other people, like whatever. And then you get up there and you realize no one cares.
No one cares.
No one cares.
They're not even thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves.
Yeah. Nobody cared. And it was one of my favorite memories of like going down the hill with these like two other kids. And I'm just like this 230-pound guy, adult, and doing ski lessons. And I look back and I'm like, that was such a breakthrough for me because it gave me the courage to continue, try other things. And then eventually got into yoga. And, a simple one is like, now I love reading science fiction novels, right? It used to be something I wasn't into. And I think following your genuine curiosity here, like whatever experience you want, right? There's so much growth and development in that. And you can, to your point, you start building confidence with yourself, right? And then you can now take that out into the world. So I'm curious, right? On your end, you're in these studies, you're talking to all these people, you're getting all this feedback. I would assume that it probably sparked some curiosity within yourself.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you shared that story. We have a whole chapter in the book, two chapters. One's called Lifelong Learning and one's called Play. And really, you summed it up in that personal anecdote so well. Like, exactly, the problem is that we have this like limiting belief about ourselves. It's like, whether it's ego related or you just always told yourself like, I don't do that or I can't do that. And when you become an adult, it's hard to be a beginner. Beginner at anything is frowned upon. Like, people, I don't care if it's like your first time sat at a blackjack table or your first time in the water trying to surf or your first time playing any game with other people around that know how to do it, you feel intimidated and you feel inadequate. But the reality, again, is this is your life. Like, it's really fun to do those things. That's why people do them. And if you can just get over those limiting beliefs and stop telling yourself you don't or you can't or you wouldn't be good at it and try it, who knows what you're going to love and what you're going to do next. I mean, I started mountain biking in my 40s. I started tons of things to exactly your example. Like, I thought, I'll try this thing that I've never tried. So in the study, which I love the study for, there's just lots of random things in general. For instance, like, Bridget actually went and learned how to forage kelp.
Forage kelp.
Yeah, in the sea that you can then eat, which is something that, again, neither of us probably would have ever thought of. But, like, when you hear someone bring something up, you're like, that's cool. I want to try that. So I went beekeeping recently and that was really cool. But I'm like one of those people that I want to do everything.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you're open to it and you're, able to do it, by that I mean like you can get to where that thing takes place or you're physically capable. It's always worth doing something once. And I definitely wasn't always like that. When I was younger, I was like you, I was very self-conscious and I didn't want to suck, quote unquote. But if you can just get past that beginner's mind and get out and try stuff, even now, I openly tell everybody I've been I've been learning how to surf for 20 years. I'm
Mhm.
like the worst surfer that loves surfing so much. It's like it's comical, but I love it. I love getting in the water, and the few waves I catch, I'm just like I'm stoked like I'm Kelly Slater. but
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
literally anyone that's watching me is like that guy really is terrible.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
Yeah. It's just, it's having the courage to suck at something new.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you can kind of get over that courage, right, you know, the gift of what it brings, not only in experiences but in personal joy and
Yeah.
fulfillment and expansion, and using that momentum. You know, you mentioned you weren't always this way,
Yeah.
right? And now I would assume, like, now that your whole career and your speaking topic, you know, you're a world class public speaker, is all about this experiential design.
Yeah.
Do you have like a system in place? Is it like you sit down with your wife and like, all right, you know, we're going to do one big trip a year, you know, we're going to do like these weekly getaways. Like, what does your experiential design look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every year I create a new version of what I call my treasure map. And that's the things that I want to accomplish that I think will bring me a lot of value in my life. And really a cornerstone exercise in our book. And we also do it in tons of the workshops as well. But essentially,
Can you take it through? Can you take us through that?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually pretty easy to do. You start off by imagining that your doctor just called and he's got some bad news. You better sit down. You have 1 year left to live. And really think about that and let it sink in. And as you actually process that 1 year, Nike, you took this like, we all think we have infinite time left. That's our fallacy about like death, right? We ignore it. Once you stop and think, okay, now it's like something like I can wrap my head around. What am I going to do with that 1 year? What are the things that I will absolutely regret not doing before I die? And make a list and make things that you can actually do. And I don't mean things that you can afford to do, because if you had 1 year left to live, you'd get creative and you'd probably figure out a way to pay for things, but things that you could do in 1 year's time. And then imagine that your doctor called you back and he made a mistake. He read your results wrong. He's a terrible doctor. And you've actually only got 30 days left to live. So make a revised list and write down the things that you're going to do now that you have 1 month. That's super urgent. And then finally, your doctor calls one more time. He's about to get disbarred because he actually he's going to lose his license because he actually messed up so bad that you actually have a day left to live. 24 hours. What are you going to do? 24 hours. Write down those things. And compare all those lists when you're done. And the first thing we ask people to do, and that I do myself, is I put asterisks down next to the things that I'm currently actively working on. And it's alarming because most people aren't working on most, if not all of those things. They're just not, they're the things that are kind of the dreams that we don't have deadlines and goals for. But then when you take a look at those, really kind of hone it down another step further and say, which of those things, can I really accomplish if I just put my mind to it? Can I put on my calendar? Can I start taking steps towards? And just putting those on my calendar. So for me, every year I do that, and I break it down into some personal goals, some business goals, some places I want to travel to, and then I put that literally. It's right in my studio
Wow.
behind my computer screen, so I see it every single day. So it's a reminder, and I really think it's important too when you do stuff like this, whether you're journaling or whatever else. When you tell yourself what your goals are, put them somewhere where you can see them daily, because those things matter. That's your future. And if you kind of put it off, forget about it again, it's not going to happen on its own. So yeah, for me, like that's really how I do it. And then to add to that, cause it's a great question, because to add to like the math of how you actually manage to do those things, you find a way when you prioritize things. And also when you look at the alternative, it's so it creates this urgency that's hard to contain. Like you have to do it. So for instance, if we're speaking about like places we want to visit, like I just forced a road trip to Sedona in last week with my wife because it's on her bucket list of places to go, and she just got through a battle with cancer. And we definitely didn't have the time for it. It definitely wasn't the schedule, but there's a limited window weather-wise, et cetera, some other things. And it was just so important. I was like, we just have to figure it out. And it took me like a week and a half of like really getting creative with my schedule and everything else. But once you're determined to figure it out, you do it. And was it hard? Yeah. I mean, I've got two small kids, a road trip, it's like, it's not easy, but if we didn't do it, I was looking at the calendar and I was like, I don't know when we're going to do it for the next year and a half, because we've got a lot of things already coming up. So if you know that you like to do a family trip, you know, once a year only because of your work or your schedule, one of the ways that we try to encourage people to think about their life is, the average lifespan is 76 in the US now. Do the math, if you're 40, that means you got 36 years left. You're only going to go 36 places. Is that enough? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So it's kind of,
Yeah, it reminds me of Jesse Itzler, who's one of my
yeah,
favorite, thought leaders. And he talks about that. It's like, you don't have, if you only see your family once a year, and your mom's 60, on an average, you're going to see her 25 more times.
yeah.
Right. And when you look at it that way,
It's way more urgent than you think. And that's exactly what I was trying to get to.
yeah,
It's like when you stop and go, I don't have time. It's like, do you not have time? Because you may not ever you may regret that decision more than anything else in your
yeah,
life if you don't prioritize that. It's really prioritizing it, right? We all have time is like the great equalizer. And
yeah,
we all have to survive and we all have jobs and et cetera. But if you really look at how you spend your time, there's generally time. Most people are spending it. It's getting spent for them probably, but on things that they aren't choosing,
yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, so you mentioned your wife's health, right? Did that, when you got the call, right? And remind me, what was she diagnosed with?
She had triple negative breast cancer,
Triple negative breast
stage
cancer.
3. Yeah.
Did that, because you're in this study, you're talking about experiences, you talk about end of life, right? Like you use these formulas and these insights to help spread your message. Did it change? Did it make it more real for you when you got that diagnosis? Did like that affect your work in any way?
Um, well, first of all, it's a great question. The story itself it's just so wild because we had just finished the book. The impetus for me was actually my dad had a near death experience when I was 18 years old, and that changed the course of my life. So when Bridget and I wrote the book and turned in the draft of the book, this whole message was already in the book. And then literally it was like the next week, my wife completely unexpectedly and out of the blue was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And it just was so surreal and ironic to get that message, this harsh reminder of what we're trying to teach people in the book, that life is short and uncertain and it's important to make the most of it, right? And once we got through all of her battle, it was a year of chemotherapy and radiation and double mastectomy and being, not knowing what's going to happen. Once we got her pathology back and that found out that it had worked and she was cancer free, we had this crazy, elation and, all these emotions that happened. And, but it was interesting because one of the things we realized is throughout the process, like we didn't have regret, because the decade before her diagnosis, we were really intentional. We actually did this work because that's how I have designed my life. And my wife was just naturally like that as well. We figured out the things that matter to us and we took action on them. And we had been filling up every minute with meaningful experiences. So, when it got to that moment, like when things could have gone the other way, like we knew we had been using our time well.
Yeah.
So it was a powerful, I guess that's like, I can't ask for a better proof point to share with people that this works, because you're not guaranteed that you're not going to, who knows what's going to happen in your life. All this is doing is guaranteeing that you're not going to have regrets about the things you never did or tried
Yeah.
that you cared about.
Yeah. Beautiful. And we're so amazing. She's cancer free. Incredible.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about dating and our lunch the other day.
Yeah.
What is the importance of having a supportive partner, right? Like, so, when we date, we think we want certain things, and it doesn't work out. And then, the right person shows up, and like, what value is it to have the right partner in your business and everything?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, if you stop and think about the reason we named the book Experiential Billionaire, Build a Life Rich in Experiences and Die with No Regrets is because we want people to change the way they look at wealth, what value means, right? So if you think about the things you're going to care most about, we just touched on it a bit ago, but relationships are so important because that's where you spend your time. That's, on your deathbed, you're going to think about the people in your lives and what they meant to you and the moments you had together and the experiences you had that you cherish. So if you're in a relationship that's not, something that's helping you become the best version of yourself, you're going to have obviously regrets about that and maybe even resent and other things. And if you're in the right relationship, again, it doesn't mean that things are always going to work out. That's the fallacy. That's the expectation that makes people get a bit miserable at times. If as long as you're in a relationship with someone that's supporting like that, curiosity, that lack of fear, that like, hey, let's try new things, let's figure out what we like, let's figure out what we want, let's take action, let's not judge, instead let's see what we can make of this one and only precious life. I think you're going to feel a lot better about that time you spend with them.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Like, is this person supporting me in my journey of becoming my best self?
Yeah. And inversely, are you making them, their best self?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, it's not working for whatever reason. So I think it's really important to, try to find someone that you can give them your gift of life and support, and they can give you theirs in a way that makes you, the whole is better than the sum of the parts kind of thing.
Beautiful, brother. Yeah, it sounds like you have a really special relationship.
I feel very blessed. My wife is amazing. We've got two great little boys, and yeah, it's just feel very lucky.
What's it like? Like, I'm obviously I don't have any kids. What
You can borrow mine. Yeah. They're on rent.
Yeah, everyone always says like, your whole life changes when you become a father.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's hard. I'm sure it's hard to explain, but was there like a direction shift for you? Was like, how did your world evolve once you became a dad, and how did your priorities change and your outlook on the world change when you became a father?
It's funny because one of the things that was glaring to me is that it gave me even more urgency to actually live in this way and not just talk about it, because I've done a lot of things. And again, I grew up, from quote unquote like very humble beginnings, and I barely graduated high school, and my parents were typical very blue collar family. They met on an assembly line making brake pads.
Wow.
So we didn't, there wasn't a trust fund or anything like that by any means. I worked a lot of crazy jobs and whatnot. And I was able to create this life and do all these things by taking action. And once I had kids, especially because I'm a little older now, especially.
How old were you when you had your first?
I was 48.
48.
Yeah. So one of the things though that a lot of people were like, well, don't you feel like, you should stop doing a lot of the stuff that you're doing and, just kind of focus on, being more, I don't even know what the word would be, I guess. I guess like, just focusing on providing.
Yeah.
And I was like, your kids aren't going to do what you tell them to do. They're going to do what you do. And just like you said earlier about skiing, right? Your parents didn't ski, you didn't ski.
Right.
Right. So I can't tell my kids to like chase their dreams and try to, not be afraid of failure and, try to figure out the things that are hard, that are going to be worth it and fun, and then sit back and not do that. Because then they're just going to go, well, that's not what you do. You're sat at a desk telling stories instead of doing things. So for me, it made it just that much more important. And not only that, because of one of the other things that people said, the someday syndrome kind of stuff, the reasons for not taking action on your most important goals and dreams. Kids, family. People are like, I can't. I've got kids. So now it's like, well, I got to prove to people that you can. Is it easy? No, it's never easy. I don't care what your situation is. It's hard, but it's worth it. Think of the memories. Again, like I said, we just did this trip to Sedona, and but one of the youngest, he's 2, decided not to sleep for basically a day and a half almost, and was just a train wreck for part of the trip. And we were exhausted as a result, and kind of laughing about it, but it's tiring, it's hard. And our 4-year-old at one point just looked up at us on like the end of the second day and just goes, "This is the best trip ever."
Yes.
And we were just like, "This is why we're doing this." Like, he might not even remember it,
Oh.
but he'll remember the feeling of it, and he'll know that, we'll have that memory obviously forever. And, it's just worth doing things like that to, break up the monotony. So yeah, kids. The other thing I would say to add to that is, again, what you talked about, being afraid of trying new things. You get to live through your kids'
Mm.
eyes, and you get to see like everything's new, right? So everything they're doing, they don't know how to do anything. So every single thing, whether it's teaching them how to ride a bike or, go skiing or read, or it's all new. So if they can do it, then what can't I do? Like, why can't I learn something that I don't know how to do at all? Like, babies don't suck at walking. They just don't know how yet.
Yeah.
So I don't have to care about being a beginner at something.
Nor do babies quit on the idea of learning to
Yeah,
walk.
they're gonna walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might take, our oldest, he walked at 12 months. Our youngest, he didn't walk till 17 months. It's super late, but he's
Yeah.
totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, just different schedules. So
Yeah, no, what you said was really insightful. It reminds me of, I just had my family trip.
yeah,
Every year our family goes on a family trip, and we make it a priority and everyone shows up. And each year one of the siblings is in charge of planning it. And this year was my year. I grew up with one of 6, grew up in like a big Mormon family, right? And my sister-in-law and my brother were there, and they have 5 kids under 10.
yeah,
It's just like there's a lot going on.
yeah,
And they homeschool their kids. And my brother is such an example to me, my brother Paul and his wife Melanie, because they are always doing something. They're in Yellowstone, then they're in Zions, Utah, and then they're up in the mountains, and then they're doing a camping. And then I think my brother is on like a daddy-daughter weekend with his oldest Rachel right now. And I remember being like, Mel, you guys move so quick.
yeah,
Like, how do you have the energy to do it? She's like, oh, we don't have the energy.
yeah,
But staying home and homeschooling our kids is hard.
yeah,
It's hard work, and there's lots to go on, and there's schedules, and there's soccer, and there's meals. Traveling is also hard, but we get the enrichment of the experience. So we're just choosing a different hard.
yeah.
And that was like, whoa. And now you mentioned that as you were explaining your story, and I'm like, yeah, it really comes down to like choosing which hard you're going to pick.
And knowing that there's immense value, like, the value is proportionate to the effort usually.
Yeah.
Like in most things, that's why, like, not everybody, wants to climb Mount Everest or stay in overwater bungalows in Bora Bora or whatever. But the ones that do generally, like, those big ticket items and those bucket list trips are super meaningful to people. And, just like taking your kids on a cross country road trip, to me, that's the kind of effort that goes into, like, that's like climbing Mount Everest. It's a lot. It's a lot to do, but it's going to be something that you talk about for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you're never going to remember the the week that you didn't do anything, that you came home and the kids sat and watched Netflix, and you ordered Domino's. It's not a memory that's going to be, it's not going to stick out. But you're going to remember the time you made homemade pizza. You're going to remember the time instead you went and took your kids on a scavenger hunt in the local park.
Yeah,
or
I remember
whatever.
the nights we would pitch a tent just in the backyard.
We did a sleep.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old, the other night, we were talking about camping, and he said he wanted to camp. I said, "You want to camp in the living room tonight?" And he said, "Yeah." And we actually made the couches into beds, and he's been asking ever since that night to do it every
He's
night.
hooked.
He thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was so easy. It was putting some sheets on some couches, and telling him it was like a camp out in the living room, and he just thought it was the best thing ever because it was something new and novel. So there's actually a term. It's called neophilia, but it's basically the scientific proof, or whatever you want to call it, about how new and novel experiences, A, they release dopamine, but B, they also expand our perception of time. So sometimes in the moment it goes by a little bit faster because it's like, it's your focus. It's kind of like being in flow state. But then afterwards, when you think about that thing, it just seems like, you did it's why like a weekend in a new place can seem like a month when you start to think of all the different activities you did. But when you look at the week you did, if you're working like in a cubicle, you can't even remember the difference between 1 minute to the next for the whole week, like we always joke about that.
That makes a lot of sense. I recently got into a relationship in March, and that month was really fast. Like we went to Austin, and then we were in Utah, and then we had to drive to LA, and then it was like 4 weeks in a row of doing some sort of grand experience.
Yeah.
And it was like April 1st, and I was talking to Paris, and I'm like, when we went to Austin a month ago, that feels like 6 months ago. Yeah. That feels like 6 months. So what was that word? How do you pronounce
Neophilia.
it? Neophilia.
Yeah, neophilia.
Neophilia. Like we were experiencing neophilia there. Yeah. And like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense because we were like, how was that 4 weeks ago?
Yeah. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it's stacking those experiences. Another question. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, and that's why another thing I'll just add about relationships. So that's why new relationships in the beginning are always so amazing because everything's new. So that's why it feels so good. So that's why it's so important to try to, and again, my wife and I are really good about that. We've been together 12 years. We're really good about constantly looking for new things, new activities, new adventures, even, local stuff in town. Like, is there a new park we haven't been to, a new playground for the kids, something new, because it just makes it feel like you're getting more to life. And that's another reason why as adults, I think it's really important to maintain your close friends and the people that, that inspire you or you inspire that you keep close to you, but also make new friends. It's important to like go out and actually, socialize and or make other friends because you learn from other people and you get this feeling of like newness of, hey, there's other things I don't know about. I'm not just like, hey, let's go to the same restaurant and the same place and have a drink with the same 4 guys or the same whatever. So
that seems like a massive relationship hack. It's like if your relationship is feeling stale and kind of mundane and you're going through the motions,
that's when the wheels fall off.
You really just need to go have a new experience.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's easy to fix.
Yeah.
It's really, again, like the message I hope people are getting from this. It's like, it's that it's not that hard, but we make it hard in our minds. We put up these like, fake scenarios because humans have, it's the reason that fear is so important is because it protects us from obviously things that would kill us or hurt us. And for, millions of years of evolution, it's a great feature to have, right? The problem is, as in the current time, we have irrational fear. It's like you said, we're worried about what other people think as though like a tiger is going to jump out of the bushes and eat us. Like nothing's going to happen. The worst thing, if you go do something new and, it's embarrassing, like, so what? Like it doesn't change your life. So almost all of the time, most of the things holding us back from trying to do new things are really just us, being afraid of like either social situations or, it going wrong, but it's not that big a deal.
And it seems like you can really hack this like fulfillment that you get from these experiences by the, in my head, I'm thinking about like, I just need to drive a new way home and stop at that park that's by my house I've never been to and try the new restaurant.
Yeah.
And just making a couple of those simple shifts feels good. I get the fulfillment. And then again, to your point at the beginning, it's like, it's going to build that momentum to eventually lead to, the trip to Japan in a couple months or whatever.
That's true. And because we grossly over exaggerate like what could go wrong and underestimate what could go right. Yeah. Right. So like if you don't want to try a new restaurant because you've got like the 5 that you order from every time. If you try the new restaurant, maybe it isn't any good. You'll have a story. You'll have a funny story about, that sucked or whatever else, but it's not that big a deal. And if it was great, you'd have a much better experience and driving a new way home or discovering something. There's so many little tiny hacks like that are just expanding your possibilities. And that's really what you're
I need to stop eating at Erewhon Hot Bar and Great White. So Great White and Erewhon Hot Bar are off the list. Those are the go-tos.
Yeah. We're all guilty of it. That's the other thing. People always ask me like how I manage to stay on track. I don't. Like there's times that I wrote the book, I talk about it, I do talks on it. And there's still times when I'll look up and go, oh man, like I'm this week has been a rut of me doing XYZ. So I catch myself, but it's hard because again, human nature is
Yeah.
pretty deeply
One
ingrained.
thing that I do, and this just came into my mind, and I realize this is lining up what you're saying. If I feel like I'm falling into routine and feeling stagnant, I'll rearrange the furniture in my house.
Yeah.
Right. I literally just moved my office space into a different room,
Mm.
and I feel like my whole like energetic life is shifted. Right.
Yeah.
Just breaking up that routine, and it feels like my life is a little bit more enriched right now just because I moved my office.
Yeah, sometimes you can just hack your psychological state, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to feel good about like with the situation you're in, like in sometimes so it's a bit of a catch 22 with you don't want to procrastinate working on the things that are going to make a difference in your life. Like for instance, say you want to write a book, right? It takes a long time. You got to work on it every day, and if you put the work in, you'll get there. But you got to start. You can't edit a blank page, right? You got to
Right.
start somewhere. And those are the kinds of tasks that it's easy to go, well, I'm going to get up and clean the kitchen instead. I'm going to vacuum my house. I'm going to go and do whatever because you're trying to find something busy that you can check a box on. So you have to identify those things. At the same time, you have to also be aware of like the things that really impede you from being creative or
Yeah.
feeling good. So for instance, if your house is a mess, it's important to actually create an environment that you feel productive in. So like there's like this balance of just making sure that you're doing things for the reason of being productive and not as a excuse to
Yeah.
not do the thing you should be
Right.
doing.
You still got to do the thing.
Yeah,
Rent's
exactly.
still due on the first.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious because in my head, what's going on in my brain right now is like I'm feeling really excited, and what I could see happening is by leaning into one experience, it can snowball into a whole list of things. So, for example, like I start skiing.
Yeah.
Now I'm outside and I love skiing, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should try snowshoeing.
Hmm.
And then snowshoeing turns into backcountry skiing, and like, has that happened to you where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go do something for the sake of saying I've done it, and then it's created a fire in you that's led you down like this whole path of excitement and exhilaration? Or
Always,
yeah.
always. And even, if in the sports kind of theme, like skateboarding is something I started in my 20s, like you was skiing. Like I didn't start when I was a kid. And first of all, I got a tremendous amount of joy at every level. Like when I was learning how to literally just ollie up a 6-inch curb, I felt like I was like in the big air contest, because it was to me, I was like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I started going to skate parks and I was really intimidated. But when I went to skate parks, I met people that also skated that were like, hey, there's this other skate park. And then they were like, oh, by the way, we also go on this camping trip, because they were a little bit more adventurous than my other friends and more into outdoorsy stuff. And then going camping, you meet some people that are like, oh, you know what, we actually do this free diving thing. So if you want to go free diving, and so, yeah, of course I want to go free diving. That sounds super cool. And so it snowballs. And no matter what it is, it could be like the most random thing. I mentioned in the book, just it's such a random thing, but like my wife took her ukulele that she's trying to learn out with our kids for a walk in the neighborhood, so she could just kind of strum a few chords while she was walking with them in the stroller. And a woman came up to her and was like, oh, just so you know, we have a ukulele group that gets together in the
No way.
park every Saturday.
No
And
way.
it's funny, since she ran into her, I see this ukulele group all the time, and my wife's gone to it a couple times. But you never know, like, who you're going to meet and what that's going to lead to, if you go out and actually do things. But I can tell you what's going to happen if you don't.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you don't go do it, you're never going to, none of that stuff's going to unfold. I think a part of that is also that concept of whether you're actually consuming, content or information,
Mm.
or participating in life, So you can be a kind of a bystander, or you can be a participant. So
Yeah, I have a chapter in my book, Holy Shit, We're Alive, where I talk about participate in your life.
yeah.
Like life is asking you to jump in and join the dance, and you can't possibly predict how dots will connect. And you know, for example, you go to the skate park, you meet a new friend, that friend turns into a business partner, you meet your potential future spouse. I mean, it's just like the dot, you can't possibly, you know, and Steve Jobs says this, right? It's a Steve Jobs quote. You can only connect the dots looking backwards.
Yeah.
Can't connect them looking forwards. And so I like this kind of idea of like life is this grand adventure, and for you to become the truest, most authentic version of yourself. And by participating and using action to get into these enriching experiences, that's actually how you play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not that you should always be, you know, doing only new things, you know. You can it could be a new thing to get better at an existing thing. You know, you can, for instance, if you want to become a, you know, master at whether you want to be a virtuoso like guitar player or a pianist, or you want to get a degree, and there's things that take a long time that you have to add, you know, daily effort to, but that's still, you know, learning more every day and getting better at things. So like there's just so much, you know, in this one life that we have that we can just get out of it if we're paying attention. I think if we just really stop and go like, where do I get joy? Where do I want to get joy? So, yeah.
Incredible. What would you say to someone who's like, Joe, this sounds great. You hear this before. I'm feeling really, really stuck, right? I don't know how to, you know, move through this or make this change. What is something someone can do like right now?
So that's a great question. And the simplest answer is make that list. Make a list of 10 things you really want to do this year. And then go look at that list after you really think about it. You spend like 30 minutes, an hour, like really stop and think, like, what do you think would mean a lot to you to get done? And then pick one of those things only, just one, and break that thing down into actionable steps, all the way down to like, what is the first step? So say it's like, I want to get a promotion at my job, or I want to start a new business, or I want to, you know, learn how to ski. Any of those things requires going all the way back to step one. So step one, starting a business, what's my business going to be? I need to think of a name. I need to get a business license. There's all these little things that are executable. Starting a business is a big nebulous idea. You know, getting a raise even is like, how do I go about that? So do I need to show my worth over the next month? Do I need to reach out to my boss and tell them like, I think I'd be better fit for this position and this is why I'm worth it, et cetera, et cetera. But whatever those things are, if it's an email you need to send, if it's whatever, do that one first step today. Like literally pick one thing that you can do to move that goal forward today, and put the actual goal on your calendar for when you're hoping to achieve it. So you have a deadline.
The end date is huge.
And even if you don't hit that date, you can move it if you have to, but at least it now exists on your...
Creates urgency.
It's scheduled.
Yeah.
Because unlike school and your job, our personal goals don't have an accountability system built in. We need to build that accountability system in. And then the final thing I'll say to add to that is tell somebody, tell one of your good friends. Like if you want to do something, call me up anytime, Doug, and say, you know what, there's this thing that I've been really thinking about. I want you to hold me to this. I want to do this I want to go skydiving by next spring, or whatever the thing is. And I will put a date on the calendar to follow up and say, hey, did you plan it? Did you book it? Did you do it? Whatever the case, get an accountability partner, and that'll make a massive difference in your actual results. Because studies show that accountability partners just telling someone raises your likelihood up to like 60% of achieving a goal, and having a specific appointment raises it up to like 90%. It's like 93% actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So
incredible advice. Everyone, whip out your notes, notepads, right? Get the list going. Yeah. Feeling stuck. What does an experiential life look like? Joe, before I let you go, I have a final question, and it kind of knocks us off the path a little bit.
Perfect.
But I'm all about knowledge sharing.
Great.
And I'm curious, you know, it can come from any point of your life. I'm curious, what is the best advice you've ever received?
That's a big one. Great question. Great question. I think.
And who was it from?
That's a good question. I think that one of the things that my dad said to me, and I don't know if it qualifies as advice, but I had been really caught up in something that was at the time, this is before I was living my life this way, and a lot of the other stuff had happened yet. Um, I was really, really, really worried and about an outcome of something. And my dad just kind of looked at me and said, "What if you're wrong?"
Mm.
And that was something that I always take with me. Like whenever I start to think about like something that's bothering me a lot, I have to stop and think, like, what if I'm wrong? What if everything I'm thinking about this thing is actually not true? And then if I really relook at that thing, a lot of the times I see it from a completely different perspective or in a different light, and it enables me to actually usually move through hard things a lot easier.
Wow. That hits for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if you're wrong, right? Because we all have these worries, we have concerns, we have anxieties, and we ruminate
Mm.
on it every morning and in the evening, in the afternoon. It just never goes away. And what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. And in my case, I'm wrong a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Another question on that I've loved is like I've asked a lot of people recently, just like in my conversations, is how good have you been at predicting your life?
oh, terrible. I try to,
Yeah.
manifest my life,
Yeah.
but I think another thing that's like life's hard,
Yeah.
no matter where you're at, I don't care who you think you're looking at, whether it's
Yeah.
somebody that's a billionaire or somebody that's struggling, whatever the case, everybody's life is hard.
Yeah.
Nobody's walking around just going, it's so easy.
Yeah.
It's not, it's hard. So, that's something that once you go into that, expectation that things
Right.
are going to be hard, then you can really start to see all the value and all the wonderful things that make it worth it.
Yeah. Well, if life's going to be hard, I want to infuse it with as many experiences as possible.
Yeah, likewise. And relationships. So
And
I really
relationship
appreciate
Yeah.
you having me on to share, and I hope it helps people
Yeah.
some small way.
Experiential wealth. That's what we're going for.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Appreciate you, Joe. Thanks for coming out, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it.